Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of Blue Leadership with your host, Dennis Nayor. Dennis is a 25-year law enforcement veteran and retired chief from the state of New York. He's also a proud graduate of the 240th session of the FBI National Academy and the 61st session of the FBI Lead a Command Institute. The Blue Leadership video podcast is brought to you by the nationally ranked Master of Science in Law Enforcement and Public Safety Leadership program at the University of San Diego. You can learn more about the LEPSL program at criminaljustice.sandiego.edu. And with that, I will kick things over to your host to introduce our featured guest. Thank you, everyone.
Kylie, thank you. And again, I'm pleased to be back here. I think we have a very important topic that we're going to cover today. And today we have James Espinoza. James is an 18-year law enforcement vet. He's worked for the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department, City of Ventura Police Department, the City of Ventura DA's office, and he's also the co-founder of the Veterans Mentor Project Initiative. And one of the things that is so important in the military and law enforcement is the traumas and the stresses and sadly some of the tragic outcomes that come from that. So we're going to talk about that. And James, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be asked to participate in this very important discussion.
Yeah, and this is an important discussion, but for you, it's even more important because you sadly suffered a tragic loss. And was that one of the main motivations for you to start the Veterans Mentor Project Initiative?
Absolutely, yeah. So as we discussed, I lost my brother. He was a retired lieutenant colonel, West Point graduate. His name was Ponce Espinoza. I lost him to veteran suicide. I'm also a U.S. Army veteran, so obviously we had that connection. Being in law enforcement for many years and having worked many crisis events, I kind of started racking my brain on how can we help veterans and first responders who are in transition.
Yeah, and when we look at law enforcement and the military, it's constant responses to crisis, critical incidents, exposure to trauma, and the average person might see a couple of traumatic incidents in their entire lifetime and can leave them completely scarred. Law enforcement and the military, day in and day out, are exposed to things that most people couldn't even fathom, and it's expected that they're just going to function properly and for it not to bother them, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, I agree. I've been through several traumatic events at work, and then obviously being on the other end of it, I lost my dad in 2013, and then I lost my brother to suicide in 2018. So in that 5-year period, that's a lot for any human being to go through, and add on the law enforcement trauma to that. I worked the streets on patrol and violent crimes over gangs and things like that. I saw my share of stuff, and honestly, once I suffered my own personal trauma, some of that other stuff started rearing its ugly head. And I know that if it happens to me, it happens to other people too.
For sure. And so in terms of mentoring, and we can definitely transpose what you're doing for military veterans for law enforcement. Can you just tell the listeners and viewers just a little bit about how a program such as that works to help people get through some of their traumas?
Yeah, so first and foremost, having a like-minded professional who's lived through similar events, it helps to have someone that you can bounce ideas off of, or feelings, believe it or not, feelings and just thoughts, ideas where you're headed, and to have someone there that's maybe further down the road for you. That's what we strive to present and offer. We want professionals who have transitioned through service, whether it's military or law enforcement, who can help you balance the many factors that a person would encounter when they're in transition from service. So our program is focused on veterans and first responders in transition from service to help them through that process.
Right, because most people look at when their military time is up and they can go back into civilian life and then start the next chapter. And the same with law enforcement, they look forward to when they can retire. And if either can't go into that next chapter mentally well, then so much has been lost. And is that part of what your mission accomplishes, with the main goal is to make it that they can have that level of wellness?
Absolutely. So the focus of the way I've designed the program and the board that I have recruited supports is to focus on basically 5 pillars, and that's mental wellness, physical wellness, financial wellness, relationship wellness, and career wellness. And if you look at those 5 factors, one typically begets the other. If one starts to go downhill, another can go downhill. And what we want to do is just be that voice of reason for others to hopefully prevent crisis. If we do work with someone who is post-crisis, we want to have resources in place to send them to, but primarily we want to fill that gap between end of service and crisis to hopefully completely prevent it.
Yeah, and let's look in law enforcement. Back in 2015, when they published the 21st Century Policing professional pillars that are required to have departments that are well functioning and healthy, one of those pillars was officer wellness and safety. And I think that was important because one of the things we really need to do is change the culture around wellness. When we talked about a little bit at the beginning, when a person is constantly exposed to stress and then that has a cumulative effect, it's ridiculous to think that will just disappear and that the person will become not affected without either addressing it or having some proper countermeasures. So what are some things that we can talk about, in your opinion, that needs to shift within the culture of law enforcement?
Well, first and foremost, I think the dialogue is already shifting. Programs like the LEPSL program, the Law Enforcement and Public Safety Leadership Program, that is now training future leaders and current leaders. I think that's a huge step. That wellness is a big part of this dialogue. If we look at for our groups of peer mentors, groups that can be more proactive to seek out our peers, to recognize what is happening with them, and also for leadership to acknowledge that these issues do exist. And we can remove that layer of risk management that can sometimes prevent someone to seek help. By focusing on wellness, the risk will mitigate itself. So my belief that if you provide the wellness programs, and it's more than just a checkbox, and it's a meaningful program, that the risk will mitigate itself. So really, that's what my ask would be.
Yeah, and one of the main components that I felt was important to always address as a police chief was that we were infusing wellness in whatever way possible into the officers' daily work experience, whether it's environmental fixes within the building, shift the hours they work, the time off that they get, all of those things. Because again, just like stress is cumulative, I think that the way we can approach wellness is cumulative. And you and I both, as graduates of this program, we saw that wellness and that aspect was infused within LEPSL. And I think that's important.
It's extremely important. And I think I shared with you before that I actually entered this program less than a year after my brother passed away. So this program itself was actually part of my healing and part of my own taking the reins for my own wellness to say, I want to educate myself. I want to pursue this degree. And it actually helped keep my mind occupied while I worked on other issues. With that said, I had some fantastic supervisors after my brother passed that recognized that this was a traumatic event. They gave me the space, the time I needed to heal in ways, held me accountable in my job, and made sure I was still working, but they still gave me that space. And I think that's important as peer mentors, supervisors, leaders, managers, that you offer that space, that consider a reassignment if someone's been through a traumatic event. The ways that are not punishing to people, but still show them that you care, and you can save careers and save families at the same time, in my opinion.
Agreed. And, when an officer goes through something traumatic, whether it's an officer involved shooting or they witness a horrific crime scene, to think that they would not be affected, I think is completely missing the mark as what a leader in law enforcement now needs to do. And I think they need to make that a priority. And whether that priority becomes in making EAP, Employee Assistance Program, available and changing the culture that all officers know that it's, isn't something that's taboo and it's not something that's weakness, but it's strength. I think making sure that you give them the time to seek personal counseling if they want. And I think that the more we do that, I think the better that the profession will be. Because when we look at some issues and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. When we look at issues of excessive force or maybe an officer being rude to someone, is it possible, which I think is the case, that sometimes that their coping mechanisms may be exceeded, and now you're sending someone who's not mentally healthy into a situation that requires the highest levels of mental health and wellness?
Absolutely. And again, I forgot to mention this at the beginning. So I am operating in a private capacity today. I'm not speaking on behalf of any of the offices I've worked for, but I have seen and I have heard recently of a local agency, at least one of them, that is doing annual mental wellness checks. So I think by providing that, it's something that I'm advocating for, whether it's annual or biannual or every 5 years. I don't know exactly what the answer is. I know there's costs involved, but absolutely, if you reduce the stigma, you normalize it for officers to seek help, not only help, but just someone to talk to. And you can possibly catch those folks that do have a significant event that's affecting them still, that maybe they wouldn't want to talk about openly because they're afraid of repercussions. So you're going to get the people that go through the program, if you had a wellness check program, that would say everything right. Don't want to hurt myself. Don't want to hurt anybody else. None of these calls are affecting me. But if you provide them the opportunity to talk, you're going to catch the ones that are being affected by those calls. Thus, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, I think it would obviously create a better work environment. You're going to have someone that's cup is no longer completely full when they're going in service, and they'll be a better asset to the community.
For sure. And then, there's a few things that we I think really have to start as a profession looking outside the box. And whether, again, law enforcement and military, so similar, but, we look at a 20-year career, maybe there needs to be thought of, should it be a 10-year career? Because, and then make retirement eligible, because there's a point in which someone may be so negatively affected by working patrol in maybe a high crime area, or just in a department that just has high volume, or just haven't been exposed to a multiple of bad incidents. Maybe that extra 10 years, they're really on the decline. And maybe when they get out, like you said, for your program, you want to help transition. Maybe that's something that needs to be explored.
I think that's really innovative, and it's going to take a high level discussion to figure out what is good for communities. Obviously, there's always going to be finances involved in these decisions, but overall, if we put the human first, I think that you can have better results, and you can avoid those more tenured officers who, as you described, might not be in the right mindset to go out and go in service and serve a community if they're still dealing with traumatic events of the past. I would also offer on that note that to include families more in this healing process or in this discussion, because they're the ones that bear the brunt of it. They're the ones that see us when we come home and we're quiet or we're overreacting to things. Whatever those issues may be, the family is also a huge part of the success to healing. So if you can include them in part of that process, or at least in the education process of what it is that officers are going through, that I think will also pay dividends as well.
Yeah, and we also changed it when we started hiring. We started asking, have you spoken to your family, your spouse, those who are closest to you? Are they going to be there? Are they supportive of this decision to go into law enforcement? Because really, when the shift ends and the person is no longer, in their on-duty capacity, it's going to be those immediate family members that are going to bear the brunt and have to deal with, some of the changes. And I think it's so important to have people on board, because that's going to be helpful, not on the front end as much, but on the back end of dealing with the stresses.
Absolutely. And I can tell you from my own experience, by bringing my family into the things that I was going through, having that support system in place, family and friends, and being more willing to openly talk about it, it kind of relieved, my voice is cracking up. It kind of relieved a lot of that pressure that I felt as a professional to protect them from it. There's things that I've seen or other people have seen that you kind of just, you try to push it down, you try to push it back. And ultimately, it comes down to how do you process it and who are you letting in on that process. And if you let others in and they know you're what it is you may be dealing with, man, that's powerful. It's powerful when you can look at them and say, I'm just having a bad day. Or you have a friend you can call on, I'm having a bad day. And when you can do that, it's very powerful, because now your cup is no longer going to be completely full when you go in service.
Yeah, and then part of that culture change is being comfortable talking about it, because it used to be, when two patrol cars pull up side to side, you know, it's it's always talking about everything but, some of the truth and the reality of what you've
Sure.
exposed to, and maybe some of the vulnerabilities. And let's face it, when we bring on law enforcement, we bring on good people, quality character. And what
Yeah.
goes with quality character is compassion and caring. So those are innate qualities of 99.9% of all officers. And then to think that, well, when they see a child abused or a domestic violence situation that's, has very bad effects, or death, to know that that's not going to eat at them, I think that's crazy. And I think from a leadership point of view, that really has to be, the tip of the spear and the focus as to how we move forward in creating higher quality policing. And that's by taking care of our own.
Absolutely. And I believe when we talked offline, I explained to you I've been a crisis intervention team trainer. We have a great program here in Ventura County where they've trained over 1,000 police officers in crisis intervention team training. I've been a SWAT crisis negotiator. I work gangs, I work robbery, homicide. So I saw my share of stuff. So I understand that. And there's lots of people out there who have seen more. And when you frame it that way, that we're good people coming into this profession with good, kind hearts, but we're also warriors, and you want us to balance that out, give us some tools as a law enforcement leader. Give your people the tools to stay well, to stay whole, teach their families what it is they're going through, because it's not getting any easier out there. It's not getting easier, especially with the societal pressure and the legal pressure, the legislative pressure. And now, let's go through our days, come out whole. Let's get to the end of our careers whole.
For sure. And then we look at 2020, again, a year in which there was no playbook for, and what the officers and so many, the department that I was chief in, and so many departments across the country, what the officers were exposed to, and how they were so maligned in terms of that they were all bad people, and that, that I won't even say some of the things that the officers were exposed to daily, but suffice it to say, I know that, they brushed it off, but I know it was things that were extremely difficult for them to deal with. And as a chief, and as all law enforcement leaders, it affects us tremendously, because we want our officers to thrive and to be healthy. And when you see that type of thing happening, obviously it was very clear by the numbers of so many people across the country in law enforcement resigning, retiring. You can't recruit. Everyone is now, fighting for the same one or two candidates. And then I think everything goes to that health and wellness component.
Yeah. It's very interesting you bring that up. So not only on the transitioning veteran side have I mentored people, but I've also mentored several young men who want to come into law enforcement. So a couple of things I always ask them, why do you want to do that? And these guys are so convincing to me that I support them through it. If that's what you want to do, I'm going to be real with you though. And you need to focus on wellness. And I give them the tools they need, at least for the interview portion, give them little nuggets to help them. But what's the big picture? What do you want 20 years from now to look like? And you really got to resolve that in your head before coming into this profession.
Yeah. And I was as a chief in both cities that I worked, I would not hire someone if they were not psychologically suitable. And even if they seemed great and they were great on paper and they had a good personality, I knew that their psychological balance will only deteriorate even with all the right things put in place. So I think when we hire, we have to make sure that people are suitable, and not that they're a bad person, not that they might not be great in a variety of other professions, but we have to bring on people that are psychologically suitable for what this profession demands. And it's long hours and bad situations and split-second decisions and lawsuits and so many things. And again, as you and I sit here as veterans of this profession, I think it's the best profession in the world. But I know that we can't bring on people if they're not ready to handle it.
Absolutely. And I jokingly tell people that this career found me. I would have never guessed that 18-year-old me would one day be a law enforcement officer, And so my path was to join the military. I decided to get out after 6 years. It was Gulf War era, so I served between both wars, both major wars. And And then after 9/11, I decided, you know what, I want to do something. I want to take action. So my call to action was becoming a police officer, and I would have never guessed that that was my career. Thankfully, I've been blessed. I've been fairly safe. I've had a successful career by all means, but as my career winds down, I agree with you. I look for young men and women who want to do this profession. Personally, if my own kids wanted to do it, I would support them through it, but I would try to also discourage them to make sure. There's a lot of this career that you have to focus on little victories. And by little victories, I mean, you got to go through days where sometimes you feel like you're not accomplishing anything. And you got to find those little nuggets in your career that make you feel like, okay, today that was a good event. Let's draw off of that. And I think that's what gets you through 2 decades of law enforcement.
For sure. And, that was exactly the word I used, the gold nuggets, because there were so many, and you could never learn this in an academy setting. You could never learn it in a school. It's really experiences that you learn through living them, of just, again, when you're sleeping, when everyone else is awake because you work midnight to 8 for years, or when, you see things in a different perspective because you're exposed to things that most people aren't. So it's, again, things that they may try to teach in the police academy, but I don't think that anyone can truly understand until they live it. And just like you and I spoke offline, Dr. Kevin Gilmartin and his book, and I hope all the listeners and viewers have had a chance to look at it or look into it, and it's called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement Officers and Their Families. And like we said, it really talks about how some of the effects of stress and trauma and this profession affect someone in terms of what they may stop doing, and how they may slowly start declining versus thriving.
Yeah, that's an absolute truth. And I think that was one of my most eye-opening books to read, at least the portion where it talked about, the operating cycle, how we have to operate at a high op tempo, and it takes 18 to 24 hours to come down from that to kind of be back in the real world. We're no longer hypervigilant, right? The word is hypervigilance. And when I realized that's what was happening to me, I would look back on my career and I would say, man, I would go almost 2 weeks sometimes without having an 18 to 24-hour break because of training or overtime. And going back to the wellness portion of it, if we recognize that, and as leaders, if you recognize that, controlling some of that overtime, enforcing the wellness programs and encouraging others to find those things that they love off duty. And we talked about this, you find what you love and just go do it. Don't make excuses. Don't worry about, you have to worry about finances, but find a way to do the things you love and make that a permanent part of your wellness program, your personal wellness program.
For sure, because as the book said, and it's true, so many people start the profession and they may be involved in working out at the gym or martial arts or whatever, and then it becomes they used to, and it was the ustas, and that's what we don't want. We don't want people that the things that kept them healthy and well is no longer part of it. And what I want to ask you now is, like, how does somebody become a mentor? Now, whether it's in a program such as yours for people, veterans transitioning, or for law enforcement, somebody, if they want to help others because they have the skills or the knowledge, how would you recommend they go about that?
Well, first and foremost, if your agency doesn't have an internal mentor program, there's a lot of services out there that I've personally vetted. There's American Corporate Partners, there's Veterati, there's military mentors. There's organizations out there that you could contact. You could have that discussion with them, and they would likely hook you up with somebody that you could help train and help talk to and get them through that next step of their transition. Or even if it's a career as a peer mentor, seek out a mentor. There's ways you can do it. By all means, I'm sure my contact information may be made available. You can contact me through the school email. You can contact me through through the nonprofit at www.thevmpi.org. It's thevmpi.org. I'm also on LinkedIn. So I'm accessible and available to people, and I could help point you in the right direction as well.
So if an agency leader who's watching or listening is saying they have someone that they feel could get the value from speaking to a mentor, or someone is of that quality that they want to be a mentor, either or, they can reach out?
Absolutely. Obviously right now my inbox is not full, but it's at a point that I'm willing and open to share this information. in this line of work, in terms of the transition space, the wellness space, it's all open information. I would share any of my contacts. I would share any of the information I've found and point you in the right direction from my personal perspective. The simple answer to how do you become a mentor is you become a mentor. You call someone, you find out how to do it, or you offer to be a mentor to someone who's younger and newer in their career, and that could really pay dividends.
Yeah, and I remember I used to give out, they were laminated cards, and I think it was copline.org or something like that. And it was, again, just a number, because we'll try our best in a leadership perspective to change the culture within our department and to make it a sign of strength versus weakness to seek it out. But we know cops are, resistant to doing things that may be good for them just by nature of the profession. And I think if they can talk to someone who they know is not connected to maybe their human resource office, or just someone who's a retired member or something that's in that line, I think they might have a higher likelihood of taking advantage.
Absolutely. Having a peer mentor you can call on. There's organizations out there like Valor for Blue Help, I think you talked about. As odd as it sounds, there's a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline that you can always, if you're feeling down and out and you just feel like you want to talk to someone confidentially, you don't want to go to EAP, you don't have someone trusted in your agency that you feel you can talk to, seek it out. Go there, find someone you can talk to that you can trust, and from there you can also build your own desires to coach and teach and mentor others. I mean, there's too many options out there for us to flounder and to suffer in our own wellness. There's just too many options out there. So take responsibility.
Yeah, and I had professional signs made up that actually listed the National Suicide Hotline at various points within the building, because again, people will see that, and it's just something that they'll see it every day, and that number, they won't have to take the time to look it up, and they'll know that, again, a cultural shift. And let's talk about now, as we segue into, the whole focus forever has been getting below 100 in law enforcement line of duty deaths. So the military, they lose average 22 members a day, and that's why we started seeing the 22 push-up challenge, 22 push-ups a day. And in law enforcement, for years, it's always been try to get those line of duty deaths below 100. And I think it's been decades since that's happened. And now suicides within law enforcement is exceeding that. And that is really something that hasn't been made too public until the last couple of years. And I think that tells the tale very, very honestly.
Yeah, one of the things I do as a suicide prevention advocate, and I'm even trying to change the wording on that. I'm a wellness advocate. Oh, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay, I seem to have lost my image here. There we are. Okay, I'm a wellness advocate. Let's focus on wellness and talk less about suicide. And again, the risk will mitigate itself. I lost my train of thought there when my screen left. But what I would say to that end is, really focusing on wellness and reframing those thoughts and reducing the stigma on suicide. I've had at least 3 people that I've been directly connected to in law enforcement either take their own lives or attempt to take their own lives. I've lived through my brother's suicide death, and unfortunately, he left a family behind. Not only his immediate family, his 4 children, he has us as his siblings and my mom. It was a very traumatic event, and I guarantee that if my brother was able to sit here today, that and we were able to help him, and he had reached out as we had offered in the past, our lives wouldn't have been so deeply changed. Because of his decision, we've passed a law. We passed AB 645, which is a gun suicide prevention law. So if you see a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number up in a gun store when you go there, that's a law that was passed in my brother's honor and in his legacy, authored by Jackie Irwin, who's a local assembly member. So my choice has been to take action, and it's very cathartic for me to do that.
Yeah, and that's huge. And I'm actually seeing commercials just actually the week before this podcast, I was starting to see more from the Veterans Association about gun safety and gun locks and securing them. And you think about military law enforcement, they have the mechanism and method to commit suicide always at the ready. And it's something that I think the more awareness that we in a leadership perspective can bring to it, the more chances are that we'll save lives in the process.
Absolutely. Suicide prevention is a proactive task. There's no way you're going to save lives by sitting back and saying, "Hey, come talk to me." Some people will reach out if they trust you. I am in contact with so many veterans and veterans organizations. I have a good friend that he trains canines for veterans as service dogs. It's faithful service for veterans. There's 22 until none. All of these organizations are there and exist for the very reason that you're talking about, is to be that proactive arm of suicide prevention and encouraging wellness. And it's just a huge component of it. And it's summarized in one word, and that's proactivity. That's how you're going to save lives.
Yeah. And, you just really answered my next question. And as we're kind of like wrapping up, this is a heavy topic, but this may be one of the most important topics that we cover from our Blue Leadership series here, because the most important resource we have in law enforcement and in the military are those who serve. And if we can't keep them well, then everything else is meaningless. And, I think when people are really struggling, they're either lacking the ability to cope, or the resiliency has been worn too thin, or they feel hopeless. If there was just a couple of pieces of advice you can offer to the listeners, for either if it's someone they know or them from a leadership perspective to keep in their toolbox, what would those things be?
Those things would be to take the reins on your life, be proactive, open up to others, whether you recognize someone that is hurting and maybe feeling hopeless, or you're feeling hopeless now, let someone else in on it and start that journey toward healing. You can find the Save a Warrior program, the Mighty Oaks program. There's thousands upon thousands, literally, of veterans and first responders who have gone through very traumatic events who are willing to help. And it's a matter of leaders and individuals having the courage to reach out or talk to others. And that's going to be huge. You have to be proactive for your own wellness. And as a partner, you have a responsibility to be proactive in the wellness of your partners as well.
And actually, I was just going to ask you. So, we talk a lot about leadership, but let's face it, everyone wearing the uniform, even if they don't have their leadership rank, there's leaders without rank all over. And so from a peer perspective, I think that officers really need to start paying attention if they notice one of their fellow officers starting to drink too much, or maybe pull away from things, or just seeming a little off or despondent. And I think every agency should be sending officers to a peer leadership program. I think those who haven't attended can still look for those signs and try to pay attention and maybe help get that person to speak to somebody. Because I really think, you mentioned it a couple of times, if they can reframe whatever it is that they're dealing with, if they can maybe get some time off to take care of their own health and wellness, and if they can somehow gain some hope if they're losing it, then I think those could be some of the ingredients for them succeeding and transitioning, whether it's while they're still in the profession or when they retire.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, from years of working crisis events, whether it's someone who wanted to jump off a bridge, or someone in their own home wanted to take their own lives, I will tell you that the one thing that always won, that helped us win those events and get those people to either come down or get them to the mental health hospital if needed, is that love wins. And it may sound cheesy, but love wins. Ever had a crisis event and had to talk to somebody, there was something that they loved that would bring them back down and say, yeah, if I make this decision, it will affect that person. And then in one case, we talked a guy down from a bridge because of his cat. There was no one that would care for his cat. So it's finding that thing that you love to save your own life first. And if you're a partner, find the thing that they love and remind them that, if they're gone, And if they allow the trauma to win, that others will be deeply, deeply affected by it, and they can just turn it around if they focus on their own healing.
And what a perfect reason that officers need to keep themselves well and healthy and compassionate, because if they lack that ability to be compassionate toward others because they're not well themselves, they'll get to that type of scene and they won't be able to connect, and they won't be able to talk that person down. So for us to help and serve others truly, we have to, as a profession, make sure that all those who are serving are well. And then from a leadership point of view, we have to infuse and enrich the profession, because let's face it, people aren't calling us when things are good. They're calling us when it's their worst moment. We're responding to tragedy and crisis, and without trying to make an actual effort to make wellness part of it, it won't exist on its own.
Agreed. And you make a great point. And I'm really thankful that the LEPSL program is bringing this to the forefront. I know it's Suicide Prevention Month, but at the same time, this shows what a great program it is by putting this in our face. And you talk about informal leadership. For most of my career, I've been an informal leader without rank, what's called as a slick sleeve, right? This past year, within the last 18 months, while in the LEPSL program, I finally earned my first promotion. So that was a huge part of it. I was able to reframe, get through the process, and still earn a promotion even toward the end of my career here. And that's something I'm very proud of. And the LEPSL program, bringing this discussion to the forefront, is going to produce even more leaders and leaders in the wellness programs of their agencies. So as leaders out there, I would encourage you to find a manager who's passionate about this, look into these real solutions because they exist, and make it available to your officers. That would be my challenge and my ask of all law enforcement leaders today.
And I could not agree more. And as you said, this LEPSL program is one of a kind. I know of no other program that truly looks at this profession in such an all-encompassing way, and they really understand the value of wellness and infusing that within the profession. So just like you, I'm proud to be affiliated and a member of this program. And I guess to wrap up, is there any final thoughts that you would like to just close with today for the listeners and viewers?
Well, my only final thought, I've already said it. I first of all, thank you for giving me the time to speak on this platform. Again, I'm speaking for my own personal and professional experience, not on behalf of any agency I've worked for. I would really challenge you as individuals, or anybody listening, to first assess your own wellness. I work on mine every day, and I'm far from perfect. But you're able to turn whatever you have going on around. And if you're in a good place, look for others that you can mentor or you can assist and just help keep them well. Find those resources and make a change for yourself to be well.
What a perfect ending. And I appreciate your time, James. I can't think of a more important topic for the law enforcement community and law enforcement leaders. So thank you. Thanks for sharing your story. Our hearts go out to you, and our condolences for your loss. And we hope that those listening and watching can actually start applying or further applying some of what we discussed today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you both very much for a very eye-opening and informative discussion. I think this will be really helpful for a lot of people. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to meet the law enforcement heroes and leaders who are part of the MS LEPSL family. If you'd like to watch previous episodes of Blue Leadership, you can find them on the video tab of our Facebook page or by searching USD Blue Leadership on YouTube. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you all next time.
All right.